Hello again, everyone. John Collin here again. And today, what we're going to talk about is the most fundamental part of pistol shooting, which is how to pull the trigger without the sights moving. It is simultaneously the simplest and most difficult part of shooting. Basically, what it entails is how to move the muscles of your finger without moving any of the other muscles of your hand or wrist. And if I were to just give you a pistol right now and just say, just hold it like this and do that, you'd have no trouble doing it. The reason that it's so difficult is because when you're holding it on the target, you have so many other things to think about. You're thinking about keeping the sights aligned. You're thinking about keeping the hold on the target. You might even be thinking of breathing, and you're thinking of, oh, I got to get a 10 to get the score I want. Shouldn't be thinking about that, but we're all human, so it's impossible to avoid sometimes. But the idea is training to get the trigger pull to be clean. And I'll ask people, how do you do it? What are some things that you do? And what I hear a lot is, oh, when you're holding it on the target, it feels automatic, like it just goes off on its own. And while this is true, it's also not very helpful, I find, because what's happening is when you're a young shooter, it's how do you get there? How do you get to the point where it's automatic? And even at a certain point, I've taken how many tens, if not hundreds of thousands of shots, and it usually feels automatic, like it's a surprise. That's what people will often say. It surprises you when the gun goes off. But some days are different than others. What do you do if it's just not happening? How do you get to the point where it becomes more automatic and becomes something that, even if you do have to think about it, you're able to fall back on your training and get the trigger pulled without the sights moving? So there are a few things for training that you can do to get there. The first and most fundamental part is just dry firing on a blank wall. If you really want to get good at shooting, you should be doing even more blank wall dry fires than actually shooting pellets. For me, I try to do about 1,200 dry fires a week and about 1,000 pellets. So I'm dry firing a lot more than I'm actually shooting, and there is a reason for that. Basically, what that does is it trains you, one, to be able to keep the sights aligned while pulling the trigger without having any other distractions. When you're actually shooting at a target, you are thinking about trying to keep the sights aligned with the target. If you're just dry firing on a blank wall, you don't have to think about that because there is no target and there is no pellet. All you're doing is focusing throughout the shot process and after you finish pulling the trigger, keeping the sights aligned and getting good follow through as well. Follow through is one thing that I still sometimes struggle with. I do focus on it a lot in training to be able to not finish the shot before you quite finish the shot. After you feel the click of the trigger, hold it there for another second or even 2 seconds. I've seen some top shooters in matches that hold the pistol on the target for a good 3 seconds after they're done with the shot. That's their follow through. You don't have to be quite so extreme, but when you're dry firing, especially early on, exaggerate it a lot more than you think you need to. Pull the trigger, you hear a click, and then hold it again. One thing that I've done a fair amount of times is you feel the click, you hold it on the target, and then you pull the trigger again. If you have a mechanical trigger, it won't click again. If you have an electronic trigger, it will click a second time. Do 2 trigger pulls in one dry fire, and that will force you to follow through for a long time. And another thing you can do is when dry firing on a blank wall, some of your shots, I do maybe 1/3 of my dry fires like this, I do with my eyes closed. I learned that one from another Olympic shooter, Keith Sanderson, who represented the United States in the most recent Olympics in Paris. And what that does is if you're I usually line up my sights and then close my eyes and then pull the trigger and really focus on how it feels. One, how does it feel to pull the trigger correctly? And two, feel if I feel any movement. If I do, then I work on correcting that. And if I don't, if it feels like it's a good trigger pull, then I'll try and remember, what did that feel like? What exactly did I do to get that feeling? Then I'll open my eyes while the gun is still up, make sure the sights are still aligned. Because sometimes what will happen is you do move the sights and you don't feel it. So if you close your eyes, pull the trigger, then open up and the sights aren't aligned, you can work on correcting that. Then the next thing from there is you'll shoot pellets, but still on a blank target. Don't put a regular target up, put a blank target, no matter how good you are. Even still, to this day, almost half of my pellet fires are on a blank target. And you do that for the same reason that you do blank wall dry firing, is so you can focus on a good trigger pull without having to worry about a score. And what often happens is a lot of particularly new shooters will be surprised when they do that for the first time, especially if they haven't done a lot of blank target shooting. They just kind of jumped in and said, I want to shoot on a regular target. When they start shooting on a blank target, they often find that their targets, that their groups are smaller than on a regular target. And there is a reason for that. They think, how can that possibly be? There's nothing to aim at. And that's because there's nothing to distract them either. If you're shooting on a blank target, the only thing you have to focus on is your front sight. And when you're doing that, your gun isn't wobbling if you're being distracted by the target. That's one of the biggest reasons that people think they get a good shot and look down at their scorecard and they get, a 6 or a 7, is they got distracted by the target and they didn't see just how much their sights move because they just weren't looking at it. If you're shooting at a blank target, you're going to see everything because that's all there is to look at. And as a result, groups can get a lot smaller. I have some targets, I do a warm-up that's 50 shots on a blank target, and it'll be about the size of the 9-ring or maybe even smaller, because that's all I have to look at. I don't have anything distracting me. Then another thing you can do is shooting on either a blank target or a regular target. Some people, what they'll do is they'll take a dime or something, some kind of coin, and place it on the top of their barrel near the front sight. This works better with some pistols than with others, particularly some pistols have a bit of a flat top near the front sight that they can rest a coin on. If you have a round barrel, it's a little bit more difficult to do, but try and find a spot that's as much toward the front as possible. Rest a coin on that as you have your gun up, and then pull the trigger without upsetting the position of the coin. If the coin falls on you or gets shifted around, it's because you moved the front sight when you pulled the trigger. That's a drill that you can do, particularly early on, to help you. And then as you start to get more advanced, and this is a bit more expensive, if you have a club that has one of these, that's best. If you can afford to buy one, they tend to get pricey. I think they're upwards of $1,000, and for some of the top ones, closer to $2,000. It's called a Scat. That's one brand. There are other similar brands, and basically what they are is it's a camera that mounts to the barrel of your pistol. And you're starting to see this more in the international matches. If you watch ISSF matches on YouTube, they're starting to put scats on the guns just for the sake of the audience watching at home. And what they are, it's a camera that will track where your gun is pointing at all times. I think it's every millisecond or something that it tracks, or even less than that. It tracks the position of your pistol on the target. You start by calibrating it, you shoot a few shots on it, and then tell it where it actually hits. So I usually use my electronic target and say, okay, I'm adjusting it, it actually hit here. And once you do that, it will track where your gun is pointing, and it will change color based on its relative time to the trigger pull. So when you pull the trigger, it will give you the trace for 1 second before the trigger pull and 1 second after the trigger pull. And what often happens is you'll have a hold like this, and then as you pull the trigger, jumps out. And that's because your sights are moving as you pull the trigger. Still happens to me from time to time. It's something that I work on. But it's a great diagnostic. It's very visual. And a lot of people, they look at their scat trace and they think, I didn't even realize I was doing that. And it doesn't lie. And the other great thing about a scat is one reason, of course, that trigger pulls go awry is people try to force their shots. They think, oh, I just need to nudge it over a little bit. My hold isn't great if I just kind of get it a little bit. And they try to time their shots, and that's never going to work. And one thing that the scat will show you is that your hold is a lot better than you think it is. When I'm looking at my sights, it looks like I'm all over the place, like I'm barely in the black. And then I look down at the scat, and I'm within about the 9.5 ring. And it's like, wait, I didn't realize it was that good of a hold. So if you're just holding and then just pull the trigger while you hold, it's a difficult psychological thing to do. All you're doing is trusting that your hold is where it needs to be, and then just moving the trigger while it's in the hold instead of trying to force it to be in the middle. And you'll get a lot more tens if you do it that way. Because if you try to force it, you're going to get the jerky shots, and that's where you're going to get 8/7s or even missing the black entirely. Scat will really help you with that. Just trusting the hold and then pulling the trigger while you're in your hold. You're going to see the shots be in the middle of the hold almost all the time. And that's where the 10s and high 9s come from. Those are some of the best training mechanisms that you could do. And now that you have that, let's avoid some of the pitfalls. Most common pitfalls, of course, looking at the target. That's why we start with just blank wall dry fires, blank target shooting. Do a lot of those so when you get on the regular target, it's muscle memory that you're just looking at the front sight. Because if you're looking at the target, that's when you're going to start to get the jerky shots. And you want to avoid that. That's one pitfall to avoid. Another one is kind of what I mentioned before. You're trying to rush the trigger pull to time the shot. And you're like, oh, I'm going to be in the middle right now. And what happens there is you end up getting very jerky trigger movements because you're trying to rush it. The trigger pull should be very smooth all the way through. So as you're lowering, you're starting the trigger pull before you're even on the center. And then so as you get to the center of your hold, you're already pulling the trigger and it's just smoothly going through. So you don't want to try and jerk the trigger. If you find yourself wanting to really pull hard, just abort the shot. Put the gun down, take a breath, and start over, and then try and get a much more smooth trigger pull. And that also happens when you're looking at the hold a little too much, as you'll stop and start. You'll start pulling the trigger, and then it doesn't go, so you try and start again. Avoid that. Just put the gun down. If you find yourself stopping and starting, you're not going to get a smooth trigger pull because it's already jerky. Just put the gun down, let go of the trigger, take a breath, and start over. The opposite of that is what's called chicken fingers. And I've had this my fair bit, when you're thinking so hard of pulling the trigger that it just doesn't want to go. And it's frustrating. It's so hard to get out of that mental framework, mindset, whatever, where you're holding, you're like, oh, I want to pull the trigger now. But if I do, the sights are going to move. And then you just end up not pulling the trigger at all. That's something that's very difficult to avoid, but the best way to avoid that is just more dry fires, more shots on a blank target. Really train your brain to start moving your finger as soon as you're settled into the hold. That's, in a match, it's hard to overcome, but it does come from just lots and lots of practice, firing on blank targets and just learning how to trust your hold. And another one, of course, as I've mentioned, follow through before. Poor follow through is another pitfall to avoid. A lot of people, especially if you use electronic targets, I've mentioned this before, as soon as they pull the trigger, they want to see how they did. And take the time. Let the pellet go. Give it a couple of seconds and take the time to call your shot as you see it. Did the sights move? No, they didn't move. Where do I think the pellet hit? Oh, I think it was maybe a 9 to the left. Give a couple seconds to do that, and then look at the target and say, "Oh, it was a 9 to the left. I called it correctly." Or if you didn't call it correctly, try to think of why. I've had so many shots where I call it and say, "Oh, that was a perfect 10," and it ends up being an 8 to one side. And usually for me, the reason for that is because I was looking at the target and the sights moved and I didn't see that. So good follow through is going to be very important for trigger control. So a training plan, what you can do is you can start a training session with dry fires. I do anywhere between about 60 to 100 dry fires in groups of 20 and take a little break in between them. And I mix them up. I'll do 20 regular dry fires and then 20 dry fires with my eyes closed, and then 20 regular dry fires, and then I'm warmed up. After that, you're going to start shooting pellets, but your first set of pellets are going to be on a blank target. And do them fairly fast, too. This is important for teaching you how to get on the trigger early and not overthinking the trigger. So if you're going to do, say, 30 shots on a blank target, set a stopwatch, do them in 10 minutes or less. You get only 10 minutes to do 30 shots. So that forces you to just keep moving quickly. And don't rush on the reload part where you really want to make sure you're not spending too much time is the hold. You want to lower it in and bang, it goes off right away. Get a good follow through and then go ahead and reload for the next shot. Start with 30. I usually do about 50 in 16 or 17 minutes, but for starters, start with doing 30 shots on a blank target in 10 minutes. And then when you're done with that, take a little break, put another regular target up, and do another 30 shots in 10 minutes on a regular target. And now you're basically warmed up. And one drill you can do for starters is to alternate, say, 10 shots between a blank target and a regular target. So once you're warmed up, take a regular target. Now you can take a little bit longer. You don't have to hurry up as much. But try and get a tight group with 10 shots. And by trying to get a tight group, I don't mean really trying to look at where the group is. And I just mean really focusing on the front sights, getting a really good trigger pull, getting a good control trigger pull, and then looking at the target only after that. And then do another 10 shots on a regular target. So that would be a good beginner training plan for you to get started when you want to really focus on getting good trigger pull. And the last thing, of course, be patient. It does take a long time. I've been shooting for several years now, and I'm still working on it. So it's not going to happen overnight, but it will happen with persistence. And that's all I have for today. Thank you for watching again, and happy shooting. I'll see you next time.